They're all going to receive this cool thing, and after this next speech, we're going to get them all up here for one opportunity to see all these characters on stage.
Hi, everybody. I'm Duncan McLean. I just want to say a few things about some of our members that are gone, and keep the stoke. We, the Hole in the Wall gang, want to remember these guys who made a big contribution to surfing. They're not here today. They live on in spirit right here. Of course, Gordy, John Boozer, Bob Carbonell, Mike Caruso, Chuck Dent, Van Scarigo, Jim Fuller, Robert Kukin, Bob Millfield, Bill Rainsforth, John Sweeney, and of course, our mascot Chopper. Thank you.
So let's get them all up here on stage for a photo, and they'll walk off the other side with this nice trophy. So moving along, now we get to the inductee class that gets their granite stones. And as I like to say every year, you get your granite stones, people can walk on you for the rest of your life, if they haven't already. And our first inductee and the first category is for local hero. And this is based, of course, on people who grew up here and went to high school here. And our inductee today is a classic stylist from back in the 60s. He actually began surfing in the 50s, but it could be argued today we see when we look at the magazines and that they have a term, it's called free surfer. It wasn't about contests, it was about style, and it was about the way you surfed. And the guy, you reckon bring that back? Yeah, but style's not in the category, in the actual criteria anymore. But you can't dispute the way these young guys are surfing over here in these 2-foot waves. But this guy that we're bringing up is another one of these characters that can talk story all day long. And when we get him up here, he might just talk story and we'll all die in a heat stroke. But I've got a shepherd's hook to get rid of him if we need to. But it is my great pleasure to bring up a style master who was a free surfer of the 60s, Mr. Bill Fury.
This is your moment, mate. Step up close so they can...
I'd like to tip my hat to Gordy. A quick story about Gordy, of course. He was quite a different person when he came to the beach. He was a motorcycle rider from Bellflower back in brutal times. It wasn't a nice place, and he kind of liked the beach life, get away from the motorcycle gangs and the usual in North County, Bellflower. But those guys ended up coming down the next decade after Gordy. I rode one of his surfboards, and I walked in and I say, Gordy, how come your board's so heavy? Well, it's solid wood, Granny. Well, can you make them lighter? Well, no. They gotta be heavy if they're gonna hit that Huntington Pier. And I says, well, how can I get one? He says, well, you better go down the beach and dig for some sand dollars, because I'm not getting paid enough for this lousy job. And I have a lot of respect for Gordy. Yay, Gordy. Of course, one of his prime blurbs at the greatest of all shoulder hoppers and kooks was, shoot the pier, you kook. And then he'd hoot, pull out his whiskey bottle, and throw it at the guy. And And so he says he better not walk in my shop. Gordy was just a little different style than the old kickback style, but it's nice to be here with Skip Fry and Dick Dale, the Gidget, because I have a few stories about them, of course.
It might be here all day though, Bill.
Yeah, so I decided to write a book. It's called It's a Secret. And certain things will be revealed that most people didn't know. But my first sighting of Skip Fry, I come up to Swami's, look over the cliff. God, we're way up here. It's like 500 feet. It's not like the Huntington Cliffs. And I see this guy take off on a red board, red trunks, blonde hair, and he does this most smoothest turn and speed that I had ever seen at Swami's. Of course, there was a lot of greats there, L.J. Richards, Rusty Miller, and Phil Edwards. So, and then there's another guy in his red trunks. This was during the Dewey Weber era, you know. He started it all, red trunks, red board, and Mr. Flash. But with Skipper, we got to know each other a little better as time rolled on, because I started going to Swami's a lot and La Jolla, and they would take me to their secret spot, which was called Black's. And the whole thing was, don't tell anybody, it's a new beach. I don't care about that, what's the waves like? So we actually ended up in competition against each other, which was kind of amazing. We both thought it was rigged. At Huntington here, in our heat, semi-heat, was Steve Bigler, Donald Takayama, and a new kid called Herbie Fletcher, number 2. He just became a senior, so, I mean, it's quite a crowd to surf with and try and claim the honor roll or whatever, you know. But I always liked surfing with Skipper because he was Mr. Smooth and Speed, and I like to be just cool and casual. Sort of part of the Surf City theme, which was ingrained to me by the greatest of all, the Silver Surfer, Robert August's father, Blackie August. Woo! Blackie! And when he did that, they had this signal in Seal Beach, which was the arms in the air, which was a lifeguard code. Pre-World War II, it was a Navy code. When it was, before there was flags and lights, the signal, the secrets back and forth, you know. They gave these arm signals. And the one was, when this one's going up and down, all's well, everything's safe and sound, everything's secure. And Mr. August says, well, Billy, I'm going to add one more word to that. When I go to Huntington Beach, it's called Stoke. And of course, every time his son shot the pier, Mr. August had the biggest Silver Surfer smile you ever saw because he had silver teeth. He said, I couldn't afford gold, so I just went with silver. This is back in old times, you know. So there's a lot of cast of characters I'd like to pay tribute to that I think should be here. Like one of Gordy's first team guy was a guy named Charlie Chucker Burgess, and he surfed the pier better, both sides, north side, south side, as good as anybody. And then of course there's many more, the Buell brothers, and anyway, Pete, I'll take it short. I know I made a short board in 1967. Okay.
Here's a true legend, Phil Curry. Okay, let's move on here. Women of the Year. And sometimes it turns out this way. We ended up with a tie this year. And the first person we're going to bring up is an ASP former world champion, Debbie Beecham. We actually have a very strong San Diego contingent today with her and Rob Machado, and of course Skip Bryant. The San Diego Mafia turned up today. And back in my days of competition, and I'm a little older than Debbie, she started to be hot on the scene in the end of the 70s, and then really got hot in the early 80s, and had grown up in the reefs of La Jolla and that place Bill was talking about, Blacks. And then she ventured to the North Shore, where she was very strong, particularly at Sunset Beach, and it led to her World Championship in 1983. She has been actively involved in women's surfing, in the championing of women's surfing, since actually she was a competitor. She's been at the head of the organization. She currently is the vice president of the International Surfing Association, actively involved, and still gets in the water. I surf with her every year at least once, down there at the Cancer Society benefit event. And it's my great honor to bring up ASP 1983 World Champion, Debbie Beecham.
Peter had sort of threatened me that I'd better have a speech, so I hope this isn't too long. Let's see. I have to read it because it's a little longer than I wanted. But I'm really lucky. I've had the support of my family throughout my surfing career. The very first time I rode a wave was with my dad and older sister Sherry in Coronado. After we moved back to California, having been raised in a Navy family that moved around a bit. But as a kid, I watched Gidget on TV, and I knew that when we moved back to California, that is what I was going to do too. After that first wave, it was all over. I never looked back. Both my parents, who are here today, supported my surfing quest as a kid. From getting the only board I'll ever need, Mom, my first Skip Fry of many, to driving me here at Huntington Beach for the U.S. Surfing Championships in the early 70s and watching me shoot the pier, wearing those crazy red helmets we had to wear back then. I'm really lucky they let me follow my dream to surf and supported me so completely. That was before professional surfing existed. That was before the idea that you could actually do this for a living existed. I'm lucky because we had the opportunity to make that idea into a reality. The women's events started out as a sidekick to the men's pro events in the IPS in the 70s, and people like Fred Hemmings and Randy Rarick, who believed that women's surfing could be viable, helped to make those early women's events happen. They tested our commitment by sending us out into huge 15-foot surf at Sunset Beach or massive Haleiwa so that the ABC and NBC TV crews could get a good rating for the agony of defeat segment or the idea that women could even ride waves that big. We wanted the events to succeed, so we dutifully complied, and women's surfing gained not so much in prize money, but in a little more respect each year. I'm lucky to have surfed the events with my friends like Lynn and Margot and the crew of women's surfing legends like Jericho, Rel, or Brenda. We pioneered this pro surfing idea together, passing the torch between ourselves, one step up at a time, one event at a time, until we had a world tour with just enough prize money to make it work and crown a world champion. Then came the ASP, and it took guys like Ian Cairns, Graham Cassidy, and the leaders within the ASP that made more of a business out of the sport and its athletes, and was the backbone of what the World Tour is today. Again, I was lucky. I got to help shape that tour by being the first women's representative to the ASP and maintaining that position for almost a decade. What we accomplished together as the builders of a professional surfing tour is long-lasting and has evolved to the current machine that it is today. And I look at the women surfing today in this event right now, that really is a great thing. A new frontier for women's surfing has begun, again. The talent pool and the dedication and athleticism of the competitors is off the chart right now. Who knows where this will go from here? The sponsors and the competitors working together to make something even greater is in the future. It may be my name getting into a plaque here this morning, but it took so many people to get me to this point. Friends like PT, and all the sponsors of my surfing career, and my own family, my husband Louis, and my kids Sienna, Mary, and Alex, who share the same passion for surfing, and always understood that when the surf is happening, that's where I'll be. Thank you. I'm so very lucky to have such a great group of friends and family, including my sisters, Peggy and Heather, who are also here today, once again supporting my passion for surfing. And to receive this award is just so awesome. I am humbled to be included in this Walk of Fame and to join the names that came before me in this incredible journey of surfing. Thank you so much.
And yelling from the back over there, an inductee, Jericho Poplar, who was just mentioned right there. Okay, so tying with Debbie is who I call the fairy godmother of our culture. Gidget. Without Gidget, we might not all be standing here. So back in the 50s, there was this little teenage girl up in Malibu that decided to hang out with guys like Tube State and a bunch of bohemian surf beatniks that lived in grass shacks at Malibu before anybody knew there was such a place, except those guys. And this little girl, I still call her a little girl, she went down there and decided she was going to be a surfer. And she paddled out with all those guys,